That's now an expectation that's put on Latter-day Saints. At some point, the stacks become so much. It's everyone's telling me I'm wrong. The culture isn't on my side. What do I do here? I need some answers.
So you've decided to kind of put yourself out there as an LDS apologist, right? And so I've gone and I've looked and I've seen that you've got a number of debates online. Yes. You've got a YouTube channel that you've put out there, and you've taken a very specific and conscious effort to go out and defend the church and to defend the gospel, defend the church history. And obviously there's a lot of information out there on the internet. 90, 95, 98% of it is negative. Right. And so we're kind of drowning in this information that is very adversarial to the church and to church members. What made you decide to go out and start to, put yourself out there and put this message of defending the church out there?
So, quite honestly, it wasn't ever a conscious effort of this is a thing I'm going to do. I started doing church media stuff a couple years ago. I got put on a talk show right before freshman year at BYU called Three Mormons, and it was completely a cultural talk show, right?
What led into that? How did that start?
They called me in just for an audition. They just wanted some goofy young kids to talk about.
And you fit the bill.
Yeah, no, you go watch those first episodes. I really did.
Okay.
Talk about classic Utah Valley, Gilbert, Arizona, Boise kind of things, right? Mm-hmm. Just the normal culture. There weren't. I think the only two running Mormon-related shows were the Mormon Stories, the pretty anti-church podcast, and then us. That was it. So you had a somewhat seasoned journalist who is and a psychologist who was essentially trying to take down the church, and then the other opposing side, you had a couple of freshmen at BYU.
Okay.
Right. So we were,
David and Goliath.
Right. We had. I mean, we were pushed into the position to become a church defense, and that was never what we wanted to do. And so people.
Now, who was it that invited you to do this?
So it was the More Good Foundation. They do a number of great church projects. They do a lot of really good stuff, and they do a lot of things in Portuguese and Spanish as well, to help members in those areas. And so we were just doing normal funny stuff, and then people would ask us these questions about church history and about doctrine, and so we had to start learning how to defend. That ended up getting a lot bigger than any one of us had anticipated. And so I started realizing just how serious it was, just how online we had so much negativity. And I kind of knew that when I was converting. So I converted summer of 2014. And I would Google Joseph Smith, or just type into YouTube Joseph Smith or Mormon belief or anything like that. And it was almost always negative. I couldn't find anything on my algorithm on Google would not give me anything on Joseph Smith, believe it or not, besides No Man Knows My History by Fawn Brody. That was it. I couldn't find anything. So I figured at least I'll be able to help people who are in my position, who will be swayed to negative things easier. So I started doing my own channel, just talking about gospel topics, and doing some defense of the church. And the two biggest criticisms I got from groups were evangelicals and atheists. to me, it coming from a Protestant background before I joined the church, I felt I needed to answer the evangelical criticisms first, and then the atheistic criticism second. Um, and
What would some of the evangelical criticisms be?
Oh, the classic,
Works
Galatians
versus
says,
grace, and
no angels that should ever come if it's different than me, and no, don't add on to the words of this book, and the kind of the classic ones that are pretty easy to.
mm-hmm.
But then you get more of more of these pastors and scholars would start reaching out to me, which I knew I was doing I took it as a sign as a good job when it's a pastors who have their own shows who were like, hey, we need to talk about this guy. I never thought I was a threat, but in a BYU dorm, I'm making videos, and I have pastors with entire congregations of hundreds and hundreds of people and audiences of thousands who were needing to sort of put out rebuttals, which I still find that the scholarship world to be both very interesting and slightly annoying. So
let's pause for a second there. Go into that a little bit, because I share your feelings on that.
Well, yeah, the culture just the Christian religious scholarship world in general annoys me. And one of the reasons is the level of ego in that world is higher than athletes. And I know this being from Texas, where we have Texas football, which is more impressive than most states' college football leagues, right? I would make a video about something, and a guy would write some article on his blog spot, which is okay, it's a blog spot, whatever, and they'd get their audience and they prop it up as if it's the most important thing ever, and they would use terms like Mormon apologist Kwaku has been thoroughly refuted on his horrible bastardization of sola scriptura. I'm like, what? And I'd read it. It's like, this just seems to be why you disagree with me. But this doesn't seem to be any sort of legal destruction of anything I've said. It's just people really love what they have to say, and they think that in the religious world, if they have come up with an idea, or they think they disagree with you and they've written down, that then means that objectively you are wrong because they disagreed. And it's almost the kind of egoism that makes my Generation Z go, oh yeah, religious people. That I can see where they get that idea. Or it's just they've bought into, I think in some way you have to buy into media savvy, but they've bought into media culture so much it's unbearable. One example.
What do you mean by that?
Oh yeah, well, one example of that is there's an evangelical musician, worship singer named Lauren Daigle, very talented, great music. Everyone loved her. She wrote these songs, and the entire Christian world just gave her applause. She went on Ellen DeGeneres, I believe, and Ellen asked her a question about gay marriage, and asked, what do you think about it? And Lauren just said, I need to, something like, I need to open the Bible and look into it for myself. So a very, kind of answer to, appease the masses, but
sure,
a very vanilla answer. She didn't obviously give the standard classic Reformed Christian answer. She did not give that answer. But I always say she's a young girl who's on the top talk show of all time, hosted by a lesbian, asked about gay marriage. Yeah, she dodged the question a little bit, but then what everyone did was they just started wrecking this poor girl online. You had these pastors and these scholars saying Lauren Daigle succumbs to the devil, and she is no longer a good Christian. Your children aren't safe with her. Just these over-the-top, terrible things to say about this girl, but because they knew they'd get the clicks, right? They knew they would get the clicks. They knew they'd get the views. And
I was going to say, that seems like something you seem to bring out the, not you personally, but when you're online and in social media, it just seems like you're going to bring out the extremes on both sides. It's kind of
Right.
like getting into any political discussion online. It doesn't
Right.
really work real well, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna bring the extremists from both sides that are completely closed off
Right.
to any kind of real conversation.
Right.
It's just purely attack.
And just like secular media, the extreme people who are the loudest dominate the conversation, and anyone who is in the middle sometimes has to cater to that. So a good example is, we saw this very well in the 2016 election, right? You had a Sanders, you had a Trump, you had two very vocal, very different people than the parties have ever seen before, and you had a lot of Lindsey Graham types in the middle who then had to, all right, okay, everyone's going this way. I guess I kind of have to. So you have a lot of the normal Christians who were in the middle who then were sort of dragged to the extreme of just sort of denigrating essentially a pop singer who's like 20 because she didn't say to Ellen's face, no, I disagree with your lifestyle, right? Mm-hmm. I see just the exact same kind of media mentality in the Christian religious world that I find just to be insufferable. And then the scholarship world, I find that sometimes the ego in that world to be just so much, or I find it to be very hyped up. So you have someone will write an essay on a PDF and put it online, and it's 60 pages. And I've had people do this with some of my videos. They'll essentially write a mini book, and they'll send it to me, and they'll be like, let's see if you respond to this. It's like, quite frankly, no, I'm not going to read your book that you wrote on my video. I've got a lot of things to do. Just the nature of the way scholarship, the online scholarship world engages is something that just is so annoying. And that's a bit of my beef with it. But almost forgot we were going before that little tangent there.
No, that's fine. That's important information there. Like I said, I share a lot of that. I have, to some degree, I have an immense amount. Here's what I kind of think about, for example, LDS scholarship right now. Is LDS scholarship is in one way in an incredible place.
Right.
It's opened up to the point where you've brought in people from different backgrounds. They've had different places of where they've gone and gotten their PhDs. They bring that background and that discipline back into the LDS scholarship pool, and it's really opened up a lot of things. And some of the up and coming younger LDS scholars, I think, are amazing. At the same time, I think that there's another side of that too, and it kind of worries me a little bit, where you have, it's that same idea that you have everybody that's kind of the same, I don't know, the same thought process and the same political side maybe, and the same participation in a broader, high education, very high elitist education background. And I don't know that is always going to play real well in LDS scholarship. I see people, again, it's some great up and coming scholars. You can see them on Maxwell Institute, et cetera. They've written great books. I love the books, but they're all kind of, to me, they kind of, I can just see this parallelism that is part of that world you're talking about to some degree or another.
Oh, no. There is I got to be very careful with what I say because
I do too.
Yeah, there's a lot of LDS scholarship that I always recommend. Book of Mormon Central, Fair Mormon Interpreter Foundation, even some of the BB professors like Scott Woodward, Hank Smith, Mark Matthews, Anthony Cwic. But what I will say is an unfortunate reality going on right here at BYU. And I feel like I can talk about it because it's exploding online. It's becoming an unavoidable conversation here. There's what I call Orthodox the Orthodox view of the restored gospel, and then the sort of the progressive view of the restored gospel. And I'm very much in the Orthodox category. I very much, I believe and sustain what the brethren say, and I believe in the core doctrine. I sustain the core doctrine, and I don't waver on it. I don't really say, well, this might be somewhat controversial or hard to grasp, so I'm going to put it on the back burner or say I disagree. So, family proclamation, I sustain it, right? The things that are sort of getting the axe on line by, unfortunately, some members. And right here in Provo, we have, I didn't actually coin the term, but the coin was termed by a number of other people. People are using terms like the BYU apostasy and the apostasy on 800 North, right? Because there are some folks who are very much connected with the Maxwell Institute who have espoused some pretty terrible things online. In the same field of LDS academia, you have amazing things coming from Book of Mormon Central and Interpreter, and these people who are, they're putting out stuff that is groundbreaking, and more people need to read it. And then on the other hand, though, you've got people who are in in sort of these esteemed positions who people have looked at for years at Maxwell and going, okay, great, what do you have? And you have sort of, hey, we think the church is wrong about eternal marriage, right? And
do you see that actually vocalized?
Oh, I'm seeing that vocalized
outside of Twitter.
I see it. I don't see it vocalized in church as much. I see, you'll see. I'll have friends tell me, "Oh, sacrament meeting, something weird happened in fast and testimony meeting." They didn't quite say it, but they were alluding to it, and you're seeing it become more and more of a theme. And you're finding the bridge between people who are anti-church, who have left the church, who are very vehemently opposed to the gospel and the gospel standards and the gospel culture, and those who are members who getting closer, and not closer in terms of friendship, but closer in terms of ideology. And that to me seems a bit scary. So yeah, you see it on Twitter, obviously, but I'm seeing it take off in a lot other places, in class, in BYU classrooms. I'm finding more of that narrative being pushed, sometimes by the students, and then a little bit by the faculty, some professors, and I think we saw a pretty good example of it this past winter semester here at BYU. The giant protests that were going on, almost maybe unlike anything people have seen in BYU history. I was there I wasn't in the protesting, but I was getting out of class and I saw it, and it only took a couple days for it then to go just be protesting at the actual church in Salt Lake City, right. Which is, I thought, a little more honest. Honestly, it's the end goal. So I said, you know what, in a good way, that's good. It's more just
what is the end goal?
The end goal of that group, as far as it looks to me, I'm not going to speak on behalf of them, but as far as it looks to me, is to change the doctrine of the church. In regard to marriage and sealing, and so because of that, I mean, that would fundamentally change the nature of exaltation, right? And all those things. That we'd be a different religion. You know what I mean? Our everything would change, and so I'm seeing a lot more of that, and that's one of the reasons, believe it or not, I've been able to build an audience so quickly, and still still a small channel, but still I've been able to get some traction. And I've said to a lot of my friends, I'm not the guy anyone should be watching. I'm not the guy. I don't have a degree in ancient Near Eastern studies or theology or anything. My training is.
I'm not sure how much that matters.
Well, here's the thing. I used to think this. Those are the only people you watch. I did sketch comedy at BYU, and I do events in the Valley. That's my job. I run an event company. I've always thought I'm never the guy someone should watch, as still a guy who's about to finish his undergrad, and then who knows what after. But a lot of people feel so annoyed with the place of scholarship right now. People who have been, and I think the Maxwell Institute is wonderful. I think, Spencer Fluman, those guys are wonderful. I do.
Yeah, and I need to say also that I agree with that.
Yeah,
there's a lot that comes out of there that is fabulous.
Yes,
but not necessarily everything.
Exactly. Some of the things that people are upset about, and they know the things people are upset about. People made it very clear to them, right? I'm sure they get all the emails and have to deal with, and that's, as someone who's on the receiving end of criticism a lot, it's not a fun thing. But there are people who vocalize that they don't like the position of that church attention or the influence that they have, and they look on church media and they found me and they go, oh, we like what you do. We feel like you're giving the message more. And I've always said, if church apologetics is ever in a place where the guy from Divine Comedy is seen as, hey, he's a really good apologist, go look at him instead of such and such, that probably means we're not in the most stellar place, which is why
That's true. At the same time, I think it's refreshing. I really do. I think it's, and which is why I've got you on here, right? Because you do have some traction, and there are very few voices that are relevant at all to young adults that can, come through with that kind of a message. There's just, because, there's only a very small minority, like maybe you and I, even at my age, that are going to dig deep into LDS scholarship and doctrine and read and listen to things that most people are going to fall asleep to in the first minute or two. And so to have a way of transmitting that, of broadcasting that message to people, I think is really important. And I think honestly, I think it's very refreshing. I think it's great.
Oh, well, good. No, I appreciate that. I think that, well, that seems to be sort of a reason why I've been gaining some traction is people want good apologetics. They want a good defense, but they don't want to download a PDF and read, some dissertation. Mm-hmm. They want something easier and something more exciting and something that seems to just answer the questions faster. And they also want something more confident. A lot of times, and it's good that scholars do this. Scholars, what they'll do is they don't give a lot of matter-of-fact answers, but they'll say, what seems to be a very strong case for such and such. And that's how it should be. That's how scholarship should be. But when you have people you have either, the evangelicals who do seem to be very anti-Mormon, or you just have people who are just atheistic in their approach. They don't use matter of fact. So they are matter of fact. They don't say probably. They say, this is what happened.
Very dogmatic.
The issue is you've got then the very nice, intelligent scholars who are trying to be as professional as possible by not using matter of fact, dogmatic language. And then you have those who are opposed, who are using this is the way it is language. The problem with that is, psychologically, one looks weaker, one looks stronger oftentimes. And so you kind of need the middleman, the middle ground people, the people who will make jokes, who will say what they want, who will get on YouTube and say, no, this is what's true. This is what I believe. Here's why I think the atheists are wrong here. And you know what? Let's make a joke about it. And I think that approach helps to normalize the really important stuff that these guys are doing at Interpreter and Fair and Maxwell. And so that's kind of I never really knew where I was going with YouTube or where it would end up, but that seems to be sort of a place I feel comfortable in. I read a lot of LDS scholarship, a lot of things to defend the Book of Mormon and the prophet Joseph. And to me, what works the best is take the good information that's there and put it out and make it more simple and make it entertaining. And then once you do that, people can find you as a resource that they say, all right, this makes sense. And then it's easier to talk about some of the more complex or deep parts of our beliefs.
Yeah. There was I'm trying to think, I think it was last August, and I can't remember if it was Fair Mormon or if it was Maxwell Institute. It may have been Fair Mormon, but it was Elder Holland spoke there, actually. And he came out and he said, and I thought it was Maxwell Institute, but he said,
I think it was the Book of Mormon Central.
Was it Book of Mormon Central?
Yeah, at BYU.
Okay. Yeah, he said basically what we need to do, the gap, obviously I'm paraphrasing here, but there's a gap, and we need to get scholarly information to he called it the garden variety member. And that's a very difficult thing to do, right? There's got to be a way of, because again, people aren't going to download a 60-page PDF. Most people aren't, and go through that, and then have them, use that information to strengthen their position and to buoy up their testimony, so to speak. Right. At the same time, they're going to get bombarded with this information, and other people that read those types of things that are adversarial, and so this attack continues to move forward against the members of the church and the church. And, there's got to be a way to arm people better. There's got to be a way to get the garden variety member, which is one of the objectives that I have with my channel and website and everything that I'm doing is, arm them more with information and faith promoting, sometimes matter of fact, sometimes just information, that they can use and strengthen their testimony and defend themselves if necessary. Right. There's not a lot of it out there. It's either because here's the thing: someone like Maxwell Institute, and you go out and you have somebody try and read, for example, who I think is just a fabulous scholar, someone like Joseph Spencer. Right. Right. It's not everybody's going to want to read that. I do. But not everybody's going to want to read that. And so you've got to have a way of, someone's got to take that information and be able to get it out to people in a way that they're going to receive it. Right. Right. There just seems to be a big gap there.
And I don't say this I don't say this to pat myself on the back, but there's very few people on YouTube doing that. Right. There's very few people doing that. And YouTube's one of the top websites, right? This is where people go. This is where people's testimonies have been built and destroyed. Right. So,
a lot of that though, Cwic, is it's like you said, people don't want to put themselves out there because they don't want to get the backlash.
Right.
Right. Someone may feel like, oh, I'd really like to do this and express this, but number one, it's a little uncomfortable for most people to put themselves out there in any situation. Right. And number two, you get hit once or twice with something negative, which has certainly happened with me. It's not the funnest thing in the world.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been slammed like like crazy. I will say my family, we have a natural confidence we don't deserve. It's in our genetics. We're just all very confident. And I'm happy I sort of have that because my goal with my channel is not to do this forever. My goal has been, I want to kick down the door of a stronger Latter-day Saint presence on YouTube. I want people to search things. I don't want the anti stuff to come up first. I want our stuff to be there as a response to anything anyone is saying. Because when I was converting, it wasn't there. There were two shows. There were two sort of not church-produced independent shows. It was Ask Mormon Girl and That Mormon Boy. Neither are running anymore. The Ask Mormon Girl had maybe 5-6 videos and stopped. That Mormon Boy deleted his channel. And then it was nothing. Then, now more things are starting. 3 Mormon started, and a couple different channels started, and now there's more of a presence, and the people there need to grow. Their channels need to get bigger, and then they need to be a defense. They should be a force that is what the Catholics have and do very well, what evangelicals do and have very, what atheists do very, very well. We need that area there, because the reality is that a lot of these, a lot of the anti-information it isn't just inaccurate, it's logically ridiculous. And a lot of times when people feel they feel caught off guard, or they feel as if their faith is being hit hard because they're in a position where they're on the defensive only and always, and no one else is defending. And then people look around and they go, well, maybe this is really just false. And so what I seek to do is create a culture in which other channels as well as mine can become bigger and can be then sort of a not just a defense, but a cultural line in which people can say, oh yeah, that's the Latter-day Saint area. That's what they do. And they're going to have answers. You can look at any of these people, they'll give you answers to the criticisms. And we're not quite there yet, but we need to be there before I can feel comfortable sort of going, all right, okay, I did my job. Now I'm gonna leave. Cause, I'm not really in the, I don't want to be sort of an Alfox type who, is just really a public figure for the church, who just, is good faith promoting, and that's what she does, writes the books.
You're talking about the tattooed girl?
Yeah. She's great. I've never really wanted to be sort of that type, or even a Hank Smith, right? Never really interested me. I love what they do.
Is that a BYU professor?
Yes, yeah. He's also an author. He does a lot of speaking tours. I mean, incredibly talented people. They're blessings to the church. Never really been something I wanted to do. I'm just doing this because I honestly feel called to do it. And I feel like it's important for me to do it right now. And, I sort of use sort of some techniques that I think work well. So to give an example is one of the criticisms I get of the Book of Mormon quite a bit. And it's the, Book of Mormon isn't true because the weaponry and the buildings described in the Book of Mormon were not present in ancient America, right? That's one you hear quite a bit. That's a comment I get all the time. And one of the arguments I've used, and I've gone to the Guatemala, the LiDAR discovery. I've done all the real good scholarship stuff where they say, look at this. And people go, wow, that's really good. I didn't know about that. And I'll direct them to the sources. The one that's worked best is honestly when I'm off the cuff and I say, and I don't really even mean to make it into the editing, is something like, you really think they didn't have highways like everyone else? Do you think they were that stupid? You may as well just say, I think Indians are dumb. And when I say things like that, for some reason, that works way better. Mm-hmm. For some reason, people go, that's a good point. And I see that's the thing they like more. And I'm going, what?
So putting people into their minds, so to speak. I mean, it's like, look, they're like you, right? And you think you'd live in a civilization where they wouldn't come up with something like this?
And people just go, yeah, that's a good point. And that seems to work better than when I give the really good scholarship that's coming out of the best think tanks, or even I was being questioned on the martyrdom of Joseph when he shot back at the people. And for some reason, people say he wasn't a martyr because he shot back. I've never understood that logic. But I would just say, wouldn't you do the same thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're appealing to common sense.
Yeah. Just say, yeah, I would shoot back too. I probably would have shot more than he did. You know what? Like, it's fine. And people seem to like that approach. And I think it's because I'm just a guy who believes in it, wants to do it. There is an appeal to that, right? That's your show as well. There's an appeal to someone I'm just doing this. I'm a normal guy, people seem to like that more often or not.
Well, again,
Like,
it's easier to relate to, you know, because you've got,
right.
it's just, again, if Elder Holland is going to come and say, you know, we need to appeal more to the garden variety member, how does someone like a Maxwell Institute do that? Because here you've got a scholarly, you know, used to be farms back in the day, but now it's owned by BYU. It is for scholars to speak to other scholars. That's primarily their audience. I mean, other people obviously go there, but you've got scholars that have reputations. You have scholars that need to advance their career. You have scholars that are, and again, great scholars, but there's an intrinsic agenda there that you can't avoid. You just can't avoid it.
Right.
It's credibility is everything, and title is everything in that world. And so, you know, appealing to the garden variety member is probably not going to, you know, you're not speaking to other scholars, whether in the church or outside of the church in that way. And it seems to me that Maxwell Institute is built a little bit more toward just that. They want to, you know, you listen to their podcast, for example, it's very much more as if they're speaking to other scholars.
Right. And sort of what you and I are doing is speaking to just the general people, right?
Yes.
And at the end of the day, it's the general people that are the body of the church that are moving, you know, the kingdom, right? It's the general people. That's who the church is mostly made of. And again, I'm doing this not to make a name, not to start a career. I'm doing this simply because I feel like I have to do it. And the goal is, I don't want people to be in the position I was in when I was converting. And I don't think they are anymore. I think there's been enough done on YouTube since 2015, 2014, where now there's a lot more. I mean, I get an email every other day, and I get at least 1 to 3, sometimes like 5 messages a day from people saying, hey, the work you're doing is helping. And to me, that says that this can work. To me, that says that people should not be afraid to put themselves out there. I look at Utah is incredibly talented, right? Utah, you've got everyone here can sing. Everyone here is good looking. You just go to the Utah Valley, and I'm like, there is absolutely no reason we should not be dominating the YouTube religious scene. I don't know why we're not. I mean, the people here have a charisma and a charm. They look great on camera. They serve 2-year missions, for Pete's sake. They're articulate. We've got the Silicon Slopes here, people in tech who are geniuses. I'm saying, and we're letting our butts get kicked online. We should be, let me tell you, there's no reason we should not just be dominating. And so I am hoping we'll see a ton more YouTubers. We're seeing you know, the Outcasted guys and Sunday Jess and some of these. You see a lot of girls doing it who happen to be LDS, but it's more lifestyle, makeup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not theological.
We need people. I think of a lot of the people who will reach out to me and send me messages are they come from an evangelical Baptist background, and they're in high school and they're converting, and they want to join the church, but the parents say no. And they'll come to me and it's like, Kwaku, what do you do with this? Because the Bible says this. I'm nervous. And I go, it's not a big deal. And I'll give him, read these verses here in the New Testament. This is what it's talking about. And it helps to calm the fears. But what happens is when you do that, when essentially you look at the playground and you have the bully pushing the kid down every day for 2 months. The day before the end of the school, he picks up a pine cone, he throws it at the bully again, it hits the bully in his head, and he goes, ow, how dare you do that? He never thought the kid would stand up for himself. We're kind of in that situation now where vocally members of the church are standing up for themselves and saying, hey, enough is enough. No more slam dunks, you know, no more massacres. Mm-hmm. At this point, we're not wimps, you know? And when you do that, it makes a lot of people very upset. I have made many of pastors very angry. I've gotten some very angry letters, and believe it or not, it's usually it's usually when it's something on the defensive. It's usually when I'm responding to something. So when someone will say, "Hey, Joseph Smith was a false prophet because blah blah blah," and I'll say, "Here's why I think that's inaccurate," and not only that, here's why I think Christianity doesn't work unless Joseph Smith was a prophet. Mm-hmm. When I say that, it's one, I think it's stronger, it's more confident, but it kind of puts them on the defensive.
I agree.
Guys who've never had to be there.
Yeah, and that's something that you do that is very different, right? You are, even though I know that, like with these debates, where you've been invited and you've started on the defensive side of this, you're still somewhat of a provocateur, yes. Right? You are. You're somewhat of a provocateur. In some cases, you might even say a lightning rod in some instances. But but there's something about, again, to me, I talk a lot about something I call the values hierarchy. Politeness is up there somewhere, but it's not at the very top. And right. I think that you've got to. You want to get the truth out there. You've got to push the truth, and it's not just a matter of defending yourself, right? It's right. Like you've got to get the truth out there to them as well. That's the way you do it. If you're always sitting back, taking all the points of the CES letter and trying to defend yourself, that doesn't really work for you, and it doesn't work for anybody else. And I think that's why what you're doing is very different, because I think there is a feeling, I think that Mormons are a very polite kind of people, relatively. Right. And there's this feeling of, well, I don't think I feel uncomfortable debating, you get the idea of Bible bashing and all this other stuff. But I think what you're doing to some degree is very refreshing. And it's not that I'm looking for somebody who's attacking. But it is that I think it's important that we, defending the truth means pushing it out there.
Right.
And unless we can be on common ground, instead of feeling like, oh, okay, church history has this with Joseph Smith, there's polygamy, and there's, feeling for some reason like you're always on the defensive, I think is the wrong thing. I think you've got to inform yourself, you've got to educate yourself so that you're standing on even greater footing when you're conversing with people like this.
Well, so it's that exactly. It's that you probably know from doing a show, you're going to say some things you regret, right? You're going to be like, sure. I probably could have done that. It happens. Right, yeah. So I've had my moments where I wish I could have been nicer, or could have phrased that better. But I think generally I do try to be kind. I'm putting out a video soon of my favorite non-LDS Christian leaders, just people who are great, who I really admire, who are not members of our faith. But at the same time, there is this is just, as someone I'm in the comms program at BYU, right? As someone who just studies media, here's the way it is. If you're always on the defensive, you look wrong. You could be completely right. But if you're always on the defensive, you look wrong to people. You look like you don't have the right position. And so we've basically allowed ourselves to lose every single time. The first way we lose is if we're only on the defensive, and we go, here's why the CES letter isn't true. They're wrong about this, they're wrong about this, they're wrong about this. How many times do you say that until you just look like a quote-unquote apologist? The other issue is our reputation is that we have to be nice always, and that means we have to sacrifice being right. We have to sacrifice truth sometimes. The problem with being nice always is that doesn't convince anyone, and it certainly hasn't done the job. I've had people ask me, "Hey, why don't you just bear your testimony, leave it at that, and walk away?" No. And I say, because that's the attitude that's let so many members of the church leave and have no one fight for them. That's the attitude that has what is it, like 60% of Sweden go inactive, right? That's the attitude that is why you've got hundreds of BYU students protesting BYU, and you've got all these students at UVU who've left the church, who want nothing to do with it, and think it can't, we have the most ridiculous answers because someone says Book of Mormon geography is inaccurate because of A, B, and C. And they say, I know it's true. I know the church is true. Leave me alone. That doesn't sound confident. That sounds insecure. So we have to kind of put others on the defensive sometimes. A sword and shield is what you need when you go into battle. Not just a shield. You won't get very far.
That's a great analogy. And you know what else, Kwaku, is you'll see oftentimes that actually critics of the church will actually mock members of the church sometimes by saying, yeah, they'll probably just bear their testimony to you and say, yeah, because the Spirit told me or whatever. Even though that's an important thing and it's a high value, they'll actually turn that against you very easily.
Right.
You know, unless you're taking it out there, again, unless you're taking the truth out there. And I would say for people that may not have a lot of scholarly knowledge or a lot of experience even as adults with the church, I think that your point is very well taken, that, you know, have confidence in why you are where you are. Have confidence in your own personal experience and what you do know to this point and what has brought you here. You've got to feel confident in that. I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned your conversion. You're 18?
Yes, I just turned.
Okay, you're 18. Yeah. So here you're a young guy, you're part of the Z generation, the Zoomers, where you're going to be looking for a lot of information online. You're seeing almost everything is negative. How in the world did you break through all of that to get to a point where you could spiritually be in a position to accept things?
So I had felt the inklings to join the church for about a year when I first started investigating at 17. I went to church with a friend. I felt something different than I had ever felt in church ever before. It was a new kind of feeling. A year later, I'm on a Methodist mission trip in Apache, Oklahoma, helping Native Americans, where I get a pretty strong confirmation I need to join the church. Those confirmations were serving among Native Americans, and one of the chiefs of Apache came to us and told us how Christianity was brought to the campground. And he said it was Mormon missionaries, like 100 years ago. The second thing was we had a retired pastor on the trip with us who told us that he had come to understand God differently than all of us and that we hadn't grasped it yet. But he said, I've come to really understand that God is a father. This is something I don't think most of you understand yet. You don't really get it, but he's actually a father. Those two things, as I kept feeling pushed closer and closer, and I was praying, hey, I need a witness. What sealed it for me was the kingdoms of glory and kingdoms of heaven. Reading about that and baptisms for the dead, that sealed it for me. I knew, I was like, this is what is true. I felt the strongest spiritual impression I'd ever had, ever. It was right then and there. This is true. Once I had that witness, I didn't really care. I knew that was strong. That witness was stronger than some guy's internet he bought from Squarespace and wrote his article and said, here's why Joseph Smith is wrong. Anyone can do that. I've made websites for people. It's not that hard. For me, it was whatever. This isn't hard to do. I'd already, early high school, I'd already been through somewhat of an atheist phase because of how much I watched a lot of, media, a lot of movies, music, a lot of it was atheistic. I know how you can make your opinion look good if you get enough views and a nice camera and a good sound, right? So to me, it was, I don't really care who is saying what. I knew it was true. And then about 2 years later, I knew, okay, this is one of the reasons why I joined. As when I did join was because I feel very strongly that the Lord needs me to be among those people that is trying to build a space here online. And so I kind of just, I felt the Spirit strong enough, and I've got that L confidence that says, who cares? And I kind of just rode into battle. And
how did your family feel about that?
So believe it or not, I didn't actually tell my mom when I got baptized. I told her the day after. I told my sister before. We're at a mall getting food, and I told her I'm joining the LDS Church, and all she's asking about is Brendan Davies basketball. Is he playing again? And I'm like, all right, okay, you don't really care. And then my mom, the next day after I got baptized, she goes, so you joined the Mormons? And I was like, yep. She goes, oh, all right. A few months later, she's like, so are you going to have a couple wives? And I said, no, but the fact that you thought that and it wasn't a big deal to you is somewhat concerning.
Yeah.
So they didn't take it too. My mom was a little bit confused later on. Just randomly at points she would be like, wait, do you really believe this? And I would say, no, it's fine. But they took it pretty well for the most part. Very accepting family in regard to those things. So
you had, now you it's interesting. You brought up two doctrines here that when you say you learned about those, you knew it was true. Both of these doctrines, because I've discussed this with other converts, and especially the kingdoms of heaven or of glory, but also baptisms for the dead sometimes, are oftentimes a key point to conversion. Because and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but is it because of the idea of justice? Is it because of the idea that everybody has an opportunity to grow and to progress however we choose to do?
It at the end of the day, I will put words in the mouths of other Christians real quick. I'm going to do that. I'll take that mantle. At the end of the day, every person who is Christian is uncomfortable with the way God's justice is administered. Every single person.
You're saying that most creedal Christians,
right? Yes.
are uncomfortable with their own doctrine.
100%. Growing up in that world, we were all uncomfortable with it. It's something you don't really want to say, but you'd be in Sunday school, you'd be at a youth camp or whatever, and someone would be like, everyone's going to hell except for us. Like it's something that you'd go, that's billions. That's most people ever. That's most Asians. That's statistically most Asians ever, right?
Right.
Like it was something that no one's comfortable with. And in fact, I asked my pastor that trip I had, the trip where I felt the push to become a Latter-day Saint. I asked her, I said, everyone's going to fail except for us. I mean, every single person. And didn't God know? And she didn't really have an answer for me. She just said, yeah, it's kind of the way it is. To me, when you have something that uncomfortable and something that's that big of a hole, the apologetic answer you get from Protestants and evangelicals, and I don't blame them. This is the only answer they really can give to work within their doctrine is, Jesus is the way, and we're not the ones to make the call. And just because we're uncomfortable with the call doesn't mean it's not true. Well, that doesn't work for most people. And that's the reason why, religions in general are declining. Christianity is declining in the States, but evangelical Christianity is declining very, very fast at a very rapid rate. That's one of the issues. When you say Jesus is the only way, and if you don't accept Jesus in this life, if you don't accept the right Jesus, right? So your pastor may say Catholics are not real Christians, Jehovah's Witnesses, Latter-day Saints, Seventh-day Adventists are not actual Christians. They're going to hell. Only real Christians, American Baptistic evangelical Christians, are going to heaven. Everyone else is doomed. At the end of the day, let's say you have 5 people in that pew. All of those people are somewhat uncomfortable with that. Some of them are very good at ignoring it, but at least 2 of the people go, that doesn't sit well with me. I don't know how to vocalize that or express that, but I don't think that's true. And because of that, American Christians have almost embraced this sort of new age kind of Christianity where it's, it's that very, that very, you're perfect the way you are, that very much that sort of that suburban Pinteresty Disney Channel Christianity where it's hey, God loves you just as you are, and as long as you love God, you'll be okay. Where the doctrine's kind of just removed, and now it's just be nice, and that's all Jesus taught. And that's sort of where they go, because the historical Reformation onward Christian narrative, critical Christian narrative to a lot of people, when in regard to salvation, is something they can't sign their name to. They don't know the answer. They don't know that God's justice is fair, and they don't know that at the same time, the atonement has to be respected. They don't realize that you can have a chance after this life to accept the gospel, but that's still through Jesus, right? They don't know about the spirit world. They don't know about those things. But when you understand those things, it makes God not a moral monster, but it also respects what Christ did on the cross. And people don't know that those two things can be weighed together. But with the
well, that's a great point. I mean, you have to understand the spiritual economy there, and you have to understand that, it's like, what did Christ suffer for? Did he not suffer that much then? Because that's really what you'd have to say. There's not a whole lot of suffering there, right? Because it's just, as long as you're okay and you're good, like we're told, you lie a little, steal a little, and at the end of the day, just get a slap on the hand. Everything's okay.
Right. Yeah. It's neither, right? Because you have then the predicament of people can go to heaven without believing in Jesus, then he didn't need to die, or he only suffered for a couple people, a limited atonement, in which case, probably not making it to heaven anyway, statistically. Have fun, do whatever you want to do in life.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, what about you? Let me ask you personally, as an African-American coming into the church, converted, what were the issues that were challenges for you there? Or were there any?
Not really. To me, I knew about the priesthood ban. I'd read some of the more rogue Brigham Young quotes. I knew the history. But to me, that witness I had, and that belief that Joseph Smith was a prophet, I kind of said, all right, here's the reality. I know there was the priesthood ban until 78. I know the church leaders had said X, Y, and Z. I still believe the vision happened. I still believe in the Book of Mormon. What do I do here? I think that wins over. That wins over this uncomfortability. I had to put it in first the historical perspective. See, what people don't like to do, I feel, is people will say, I believe the gospel's true, but unfortunately what they mean is, I believe the gospel's true until something in the church offends me. And what that means is you can be totally okay with the church. Like I'll say, I'll admit a bias here. Polygamy doesn't make me that uncomfortable, and that might be because I'm a guy, right? I'm a guy. It makes women far more uncomfortable than it makes men.
Sure.
But at the same time, priesthood ban could make me more uncomfortable than it could make you, right?
Right.
No matter what, there's always a thing that makes you a little more uncomfortable than the guy next to you. Doesn't mean the church is not true until that. Well, respectively, it should have been not true until the guy next to you. Your issue isn't more important than his, right? So if you get into that category of, okay, there's things that are going to make everyone uncomfortable that we don't understand, do I still believe in the Book of Mormon? I said, I believe that vision happened in the grove. I believe in this book. So then I had to reconcile here, okay, what does the church actually teach? What does the church teach in regard to race? What they teach is normal. Everyone's a child of God. We're all equal. Did people in the past have different beliefs? Yeah, but just about everywhere they did. Does that reflect the restored gospel, or does that reflect humankind?
Well, pretty much all religions did.
Yeah, I mean, people people pretend as if God puts forth his truth in a culture that is not influenced by anything in the world. But that's not the biblical pattern set up, right? I've said plenty of times talking to different religious leaders about, priesthood ban. And one of the things I'll say is, they'll say, well, if Brigham Young was really a prophet, wouldn't God have just told him that he shouldn't have had those beliefs? And I'll say, if Paul was really an apostle, wouldn't God have just told him he was kind of wrong about women? And I'll say that, and they'll say, well, I mean, like, hey, he had that cultural belief. That is what the Jews believed at the time in regard to women. They were, eternally speaking, they were not right. They had that cultural mindset and that belief. He made it into scripture. Paul declares his apostolic authority, and then right after says women shouldn't speak in church. I think he's wrong. Can I still say he was an apostle who had authority, who was appeared to by Christ, who was inspired, and who was leading the church? I can say both of those.
Well, the other thing to think of there is when you are in a culture, things that are offensive to people are oftentimes relative.
Right.
And so when you're in a certain time, we can't all just be Monday morning historians, is what I usually say.
Right.
You go back in time, you go to a different culture, you don't understand everything. I try to explain the women thing there a little bit, at least, is that you don't have, people are just trying to survive. You had to have very specific gender roles. You had to have everything just to make it, just to be able to live every day. And so, to come in and say, I'm going to take my perceptions here of my culture of 21st century Western U.S., culture and lay it down on Paul or Brigham Young even.
Right.
Right. You got to weigh that out a little bit.
Oh yeah. No, I mean the funny thing is I've talked to some people, and the majority of the people who ask me about the priesthood ban who are offended are not even black. Right.
Yeah.
It seems to be the most people who will be like, this is terrible. And I'm like, hey, I should be the one. Come on, this is what's going on here. I'll say to them, I've had thorough conversations about this. I'll say, okay, you think it's wrong what happened? Do you think this makes the church false? And he goes, yes. The way the church treated black people was unforgivable. I can never remember the church again. I'll ask, how do you feel about LGBT issues in the church? And I'll say, you know what? I think it's wrong. I think the church should just be a little more progressive and open-minded. And I'll say, okay, how do you feel about religious culture in Africa? And say, oh, I'd love to learn more about it, such and such. And, I love African culture. And I'll say, you can't reconcile all three things. Go to Ghana. My ancestry is from Ghana. Gay people, it's illegal to be gay there. Okay? It's actually illegal. Let's say your whole ward tomorrow was replaced, right? Your ward in Eagle, Idaho was replaced, and it's completely all members from Ghana to make you feel better about the priesthood ban. You're going to feel a lot worse about LGBT issues in your ward there than you are going to feel. No matter what, there's a thing. That's how it is. My view is that Brigham Young, you look at what he had to do to bring an entire group of people to a new country, essentially. He had seen his friends get murdered. He knew women who had been assaulted. His best friend was killed by a mob. And he had a very general distrust of not only all the other Christian churches that were around who were kind of okay with a lot of the persecution, but the U.S. government. This is someone who was under more pressure than any of us will ever face in our entire lifetime. This is someone who accomplished more than most people will ever accomplish in their lifetime. And you're going to bag on him and throw everything away because he had a belief on race that was pretty common for his day, and sometimes in the case, a little less offensive than what was common for his day.
Sure.
I was like, as a black person, I say, I don't know how you can get to that position. I think that's ridiculous. If you look at what Brigham Young did, it is objectively an impressive thing. I believe he was I don't think he could have done what he did without being inspired by the Lord. And when I say that to people, they'll kind of be like, wait, what? You're supposed to hate Brigham Young. No. I think he had those beliefs. And you know what? I can go into apologist mode and I can track down where he started to believe those things and from what. But at the end of the day, can faulty people be inspired? And can their faultiness only be faultiness that doesn't specifically offend you? Or can it be true faultiness? And you can't, there is an aspect of that personal pride that actually gets in the way of saying the prophets are infallible. They're infallible until something that bothers me, then they're just wrong.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, it's a good point. So it's a very good point. It's very much a truth. I wanted to ask you, being a Zoomer, being from Generation Z, and I've had this discussion with my family, my kids, and others, and there's more of an issue today than there was 20 years ago, say, for example, of young adults, people coming, even teenagers, right? Really having a faith crisis and struggling with the church, maybe falling away from the church. What do you think are some of the reasons for that?
So, I mean, we're in, I think that the biggest reason that we're in a crazy change of culture. We are in a position that I'm not sure the religious world was ready to handle. We've got unlimited information, and our social media is built up in a way where if someone's on the winning side, it's hard to win. So you've got people on Instagram, Twitter, and let's just use Instagram and Twitter just right now. If someone tweets, "Church sucks," blah blah blah, and they're tapped in, and they get 2,000 retweets and 10,000 likes, and then someone underneath them says, "No, the church is true. That's not what I believe," and they get 50 likes. You've got the ideology of ratio, where people can actually see literal support for something in front of their eyes. They can literally see the number of people supporting something, and they can see that they're on the least popular end. They also will then they're getting it from different angles. So especially members of the church in Arizona, right, in Tempe, Arizona, or Gilbert or Mesa, where there is an evangelical influence, and there's also an atheistic ex-Mormon influence. You have both ends saying the exact same thing. Joseph Smith was wrong. Joseph Smith was wrong. And you've got the atheists that are evangelicals that are borrowing from the atheists sometimes. So it's not just that you're a general Christian versus non-Christian or versus atheist. It's you're set apart from the Christian world and the secular world. So you have double the amount of enemies, quote unquote. And then you've got people ideologically opposed to you and culturally opposed to you. And then you've just got the worldliness with open arms. You've got everyone with an iPhone or an Android that, if someone wants to watch porn, they're a click away. And I hate to sound like some bishop that are like, brother in the pornography, but that's truly what it is, right? I mean, I wasn't alive in the 70s or 80s, but the stories I hear is you had to go to like a magazine shop and you had to like put a hood on and go into the sketchy store and buy it, and you only used cash because you didn't want your card linked to it and you were ashamed. You've got Pornhub is like number in the top 10 most visited websites in the world, right? So you've got essentially what's immorality so easy. The access is so incredibly easy. And you've got sexual immorality that's become so normalized. Now when you're dating someone in high school, it's expected, okay, you're gonna have sex with them. That's expected. And that's now an expectation that's put on Latter-day Saints, and it at some point the stacks become so much. It's okay, everyone's telling me I'm wrong. The culture isn't on my side. what do I do here? I need some answers. Let me get the answers. If I can get the answers to some of my questions or know some things that'll remedy and make me feel better as opposed to just a conference talk or just feeling the spirit, I'll be okay. Okay, I went online to find answers. I found the CES letter. Right. I found this. I'm not getting answers. I'm just getting more stuff that's pushing me away.
And it's a lot easier. I mean, just to interject real quick, to me, and again, I'm not in your generation here, but when you are so used to getting those answers by simply clicking on something,
right?
It's a lot easier to go down a rabbit hole real quickly instead of, say, talk to your friends even, or your parents, or someone who might give you a different answer and different guidance, right? It's like, I've got everything right here at the palm of my hands.
Right.
And so, you know, I think one of the major issues with this, and it goes along with what you're saying, is I can not just click on something, I can easily start going down the rabbit hole and take on a whole new ideology.
Right.
Just from first off what I get online, and then start building a world around that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we get answers. You get the wiki house. You get answers to everything fast, and then when it comes to the church, you have the same mindset, and you can't get the answers. And then people say, people's their ideologically, their testimony is faltering, and they're just holding on by the Spirit. But what happens when you can't hold on just emotionally anymore, right?
Sure.
What happens when you get to BYU or UVU or the University of Utah or ASU, and a couple of your friends have left the church and they pass it off as ridiculous that you're still in the church? What happens when your family member leaves? What happens when it gets really close to home to you, and you've got just a little bit left, and then there's a protest on campus and the church looks evil? Then you're out. You know what I mean? We're in a unique position because we have so much piling on us, whereas other Christian churches don't. They don't really have anyone specifically saying, "Oh, you've got a false gospel, Baptist." No one's saying that to them. No one's going through Christian history and pointing out the flaws. Although
if there's a faith crisis, it's atheism for them. That's it.
Right.
Yeah, it's not. It's very rarely, oh, well, actually the Methodists are right and not the Baptists.
Right.
You know.
But even in that though, what's almost a miracle is that our retention rate is higher still, even though we are on the least likely, right? Even though we've got the worst going essentially for us here, our retention rate is higher.
I think that's community. I do think that's a lot of it. I think a lot of it is community. I mean, you look at the Pentecostals, for example, they're the same way. They have a high retention rate, but they create a stronger community that you might find in some of the other evangelical faiths.
Right.
You're saying, okay, it's easier to fall down the rabbit hole. It's easier to find answers online, and then I liked your point about social media and all the likes, right? It's like, okay, well, what should I really virtue signal out here then? If I'm getting 10 times the likes on this, but what are the specific issues that might be a problem? In other words, are there doctrinal issues that you see are problems?
I would say the biggest problems, I wouldn't actually even say for the most members, it isn't necessarily doctrinal issues as much as it is confusion about church history and social climate. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people don't know what to do with the gay marriage issue in the church, right? The nation's going one way, Western culture's going one way, religions are standing in the opposite direction. They're saying, we're not going to budge on this. Right now, we're at a very interesting crossroads where people are saying, what do I do? Am I a homophobe if I still am a member of the church? And so that I think that's probably in the top two issues right now. So much so where there was a protest on BYU campus of all places, right? You know what I mean? So I mean, it is that's something that's not something that apologetics can fix. That's that's something that's you kind of have to make a decision there. Church history is one that apologetics can come in with heavy arm and say, hey, here's the thing. What people are saying about this and this and this it's false, or here's what's actually great about Joseph Smith. But I find that it's usually those two. It's usually some CES letter adjacent church history thing, Book of Abraham, a polygamy, a race and priesthood, or it's LGBT issues. Sometimes you do get the people that are joining the church from the evangelical background who don't care about LGBT issues. That's not their focus. They've already decided they want to be in the Orthodox religious circle, and you're just doing biblical apologetics to them. On the whole, though, that's a small percentage, and for the most part, it is it's one of those two. And right now, what we have to do is, my opinion is, for the historical things, in regard to media, we need the Fair Mormon guy. We need a team of young people to go to Fair Mormon and say, give us the information. We're going to make it look good. And we're going to put out a 7-minute video that looks good. It's entertaining. It gets it across, and it uses charisma. That's
how do we get that done? How does that start? How does it go beyond what you're doing? How do we get other people, young people, to go out and do that?
They have to see that it's being done and that they have the means to do it. I've often joked that I love the Doom Book of Mormon videos, but a lot of the actual stuff that comes out of the actual church media, I've often joked you could go to the Utah Valley and get some of those LDS girls who have 1 million subscribers on YouTube making silly videos and makeup, and you could say, we're going to give you $10,000 each to go fix church media. I bet it would be better. I guarantee you those girls from outside.
Well, certainly for the youth, it would be better. No question. For young adults, it would definitely be better.
They know what to do. They know what to say. They know how to make it look. I have a new show coming out pretty soon called This Is the Show, produced by Fair. It's a sketch comedy talk show specifically about defending the church and taking down the CES letter and putting anti-Mormon criticisms on the defensive. Mm-hmm. And it's all done with humor, but that's going to be coming out soon. And I think we're going to be seeing how it can work. I think regard to LGBT issues, that right there and I have to be careful with what I say because I don't want to be insensitive to anyone, but that's a cultural battle. In the 1940s or 50s, if someone said they were gay, they were immediately associated with being a pervert or a pedophile. Now, you think of gay people, you think of Modern Family. You think of Queer Eye. You think of these lovable people. Who on earth would be against them? No one would, right? And the way that the LGBT movement was able to do that is they got hold of culture. Music, entertainment, they knew what to do. They got a hold of culture, and they were able to completely change the narrative. Latter-day Saints, we've been here since 1830, and we have not gotten a hold of culture. We never really will because we're set apart from the culture of the world. But we can do a better job. The position of saying, I believe in traditional families, or I believe that marriage between a man and a woman in the temple because that's the only way people can become like God. I've actually explained that to people, we don't just believe Adam and Eve, we believe Heavenly Father and Mother, and their union is what creates godhood, essentially. And we believe to get to the top kingdom of heaven, you have to be in that union, or else you can't become a god. When I just say that to people, they go, oh, all right, okay, I get it. When you don't explain it that way, just bare bones to people, even though it leaves more questions, they just think you're being a jerk. So when I've explained, I lived in San Francisco for a year, and I would have a lot of gay people ask me about that. Hey, Kwaku, why can't we get married in your church? If you just say, well, God just wants us to be man and woman, people just think you're being a jerk. When you say, we believe this specific thing that can only happen because of this eternal law, and it doesn't work with two men, they're not as offended. They go,
so there is then, it's not just cultural then, right? Because so you are, I mean,
but that has to be brought into the culture. Yeah, that has to be brought into the culture and has to be spoken in a way that people get. We have to make that a part of the cultural conversation of LGBT issues and the church. Mm-hmm. We've shied away from it, I feel. I feel because that's a doctrine that makes our other Christian brothers and sisters uncomfortable when you say becoming gods. And because of that, we've decided to totally, sometimes we'll use terms like eternal progression, exaltation, which are somewhat open-ended terms to certain people. And that's to appease these other religious people. But to the people who are nominally religious and secular, when you say becoming a god, they go, whoa, what? That's cool. That's their reaction. They go, all right, okay. People make fun of other people say Mormons believe they're getting a planet, which I get. Right? It's hyperbolic and it's to evoke something weird. But to someone who hasn't chosen a religion, but hears that, you know what they think? Oftentimes they think that's kind of cool. That's what they think. And right. When you say, "Hey, my belief in this isn't because of a dislike for gay people at all. Here's what you're missing from the conversation. We believe in becoming gods, Heavenly Father and Mother. Here's what it's got to be. You can only reach that place of becoming a god if you are sealed with that ceremony, with that what we call this eternal priesthood power to become a god. It's got to be a man and a woman together. And we actually believe Adam and Eve are modeled after that. We don't really believe marriage is modeled after Adam and Eve. We believe they're modeled after something more. Women can become gods too. They go, oh, that's completely different than I ever thought. Sure. I thought it was just a bunch of old guys at a pulpit trying to be mean to gay people. When you make that a part of the conversation and put that in the cultural dialogue, it's a game changer.
Well, that goes back to what we're discussing about being nice and polite, right? Instead of bringing the truth forward like that. That example right there is exactly what we were talking about, and it does change everything. I had an interview last year with a faithful gay convert. He's a great guy, and he said the same thing. You know, in fact, he's a very interesting story, but he came to the church, believe it or not, from the same podcast you started talking about opening up this interview, which was an anti-Mormon podcast. And the reason is because he was a Jehovah's Witness. And you know, he never really, he grew up a Jehovah's Witness. He never really, you know, turned away from that in a sense. He still always was interested in that community. He never wanted to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore, but he was interested in that. And so he would follow interviews about gay people that were basically excommunicated, and not just from the church, but from their families and society, period, right?
Right.
And from doing that and going through YouTube, he came along those interviews, and he said, I couldn't believe the stark difference in number one, in the cultural side of things, where those that were gay and Mormon were actually still loved and accepted. You know, it's just, okay, they had the law of chastity, right? And for him, what ended up doing it was, number one, same thing you brought up with baptisms for the dead and the kingdoms of glory. That's number one. For him being, let's just call it in some ways an outsider, as, you know, being gay, being in a minority group, that made sense to him. That was like, okay, this is much easier. This is not black and white. If I am gay, I'm going over here. If I'm not, I can go over here. He's like, this makes a lot more sense to me. And the other thing was, believe it or not, he came to the church because of the LDS policies. Now, 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been the same, but he did come to the church because of the current gay LDS policies and what we believed. He was great with that. Same with you. He read the Book of Mormon, and that was it. He was able to overcome whatever history there was there in the past. But the key there, I think a lot of the cultural things, if you can articulate common sense and the doctrines behind it well, I think that you are in a much better position to fend off attacks, to fend off doubts. And if you're not a member, I think that for a non-member that hasn't been brought up in just the polite environment, it's a lot easier to say, yeah, why I want to hear more of this. I want to hear more of this, instead of, it's like you're saying, I mean, what you do is, what I've seen that you're doing is you actually take a lot of what is attacked in the church and you turn it on its head, right? You actually say, it's not like, I mean, honest with you, it's a little bit, well, I'm not going to go there, but it's, you're taking what seems to be a weakness and you're making it a strength.
Right. Yeah. That's one of the things I do. That's high on the list of, I always try to do that. And I'm going to be coming out with something on LGBT issues very soon, actually discussing that. Because when you just say, the problem with just saying, which is good, we should love everyone. That's very important. But the problem when you just say, we should love more, it does not answer any of the questions.
Yeah, what is that?
What do you mean love more? Because the person who wants to get married, who can't get married in the church, says, okay, loving me more means changing your doctrine. The person who doesn't want to change doctrine says loving more just means like accepting and not judging as much. You can only say love more until you get to the bypass and say, all right, we're just throwing words. This is word salad, right? Let's get to the nitty gritty. Okay. Here's what it is. This is the doctrine here. If we're being consistent with our doctrine, then we can't allow it, but we can call for greater acceptance. We can call for, hey, don't use some of these words. We can say, if someone leaves the church because they're gay for certain such reasons, understand that mental health and a number of these things are a factor, okay? We should not be judging here, but we can't budge here. And when you make that clear and you can vocalize that with articulation, people get it. But until you do that, you know how people view it? They view it as 12 mean old white guys who don't like rainbows. That's what they view it as. But that's not the case. You know, Elder Christofferson, brother is gay, right? Elder Gong's grandson, I believe, is gay. People, it's not that they're set apart or they don't understand it. No, it's in their families too. It's in their friendships too. But the doctrine doesn't budge. And if you can communicate that in a way where you don't look like a jerk and you don't look like weak, people say, this makes sense. I understand that if they were to change this, they don't even have a religion anymore. I understand that, and this is why they hold that position. Because of our doctrine, we're in a more unique place than other religious, like other Christian churches, because we're drawing after something deeper than Adam and Eve or Paul's writings. We're drawing after something that is intrinsic, and we are on better footing. And so again, I'm always like, I don't know why we have totally just missed the boat here. And
well, we didn't used to, though. You know, it's cyclical, right? Because as you go back to the 19th century, that's where things with Brigham Young and everybody, that's where we start looking at, wow, that was like the deep doctrine period of time, right? You got the Pratts and others. It's like, wow, this is really deep doctrine, but it's also what people were drawn to. Right. The stuff, going back to Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, the Pratts, et cetera, you're in a place where, even though we wouldn't accept everything there, especially from the Pratts and a little bit from Brigham Young as doctrine today, but it's what drew people there, because you were a separated people, right? And your own, who knows what it was going to be, Deseret was going to become at the time. They didn't know. Is it going to be our own country, our own state? Is it our own? Who knows, right? Yeah. They were trying to get California and Oregon and everything else as part of the state. But it was a time where you were persecuted heavily. You had the U.S. Army coming after you, where you were about to be, you were very, very close to war.
Right.
And then, so you had a reason to stay different. You had a reason to stay at arm's length. And I think that coming into the media world, into the 20th century, there was more of a, even all the way up through Gordon B. Hinckley and I Am a Mormon, right, type of a feeling. Right. It was like, we want to look as normalized as possible to the world, right? It's like, right. and there's reason for that. There is reason for that. But on the flip side of that, I think that as you kind of call Mormonism, or the stigma of Mormonism, or the perception of Mormonism, like a rough stone rolling, right?
Right.
It's like, if you smooth everything out, you're just like every other stone out there.
Right.
And so I think there needs to be a little bit of a counter there that says, look, these things where we're unique for a reason. And here is why. Right. And so if there was the ability to have examples, more examples, and Fair Mormon does a pretty good job, but more examples of being able to articulate these doctrines, and even some cultural points, benefits of the community, of being a part of the LDS community. I think that you play on it. I think you play on those strengths. That's what you should do. Right. Instead of saying, oh, that makes me weird, so I don't even want to talk about it. That's my point of view anyway.
No, yeah. When you embrace the weird, it's less weird. When you, yeah. It's like when someone's coming to your door to sell you something, and you want to say, okay, how much is it? And they evade, you go, yeah. What? Now I'm focusing on the thing you're not saying, and it's making me more uncomfortable.
Sure.
You just straight up say it. And so, I mean, we be respectful, right? There's certain things we need to be we need to be respectful about. But on my channel, I try to just be honest about what we believe, and then show how it's a strength, as opposed to avoiding it to seem like everyone else.
Sure. Because I think that's the right approach, Kwaku. I really do. I think you need to keep doing that. I think that's important.
I think Joseph Smith would be very upset in the next life if all the apologists meet up with him in the next life, and he says, all right, who here tried to make us sound like Presbyterians or Methodists? Because guess what? I got shot. All right. I got shot for that. I cannot believe you would do that. So yeah, just being real, just being honest. And that's what I'm doing. And it looks like
and I would say, and learn to articulate
right
the doctrine, and learn to articulate the position. There's so many things that are, the Book of Abraham you had brought up previously. There are really good ways, without getting into too much scholarly work, to go through that, right. Church history and the Book of Abraham and the process of Joseph Smith looking into a hat and all these things are, to me, I talk a lot about the higher and lower laws.
Right.
And to me, those are all lower law things. It's the physical evidence. It's the science behind right. How was the Book of Mormon translated, or how was the Book of Abraham translated. And everybody gets hung up on these things.
Right.
And I'm not saying they're not important. I'm not saying it's not good to know and to go through it, and for Fair Mormon and others to, Jeff Lindsay does a great job with this, to go in and back up and support these things. But in the end, to me, it's about the text. Right. It's about what is the proof, right? And we're told by the Savior, you shall know them by their fruits. Right. And it's like, what is the Book of Mormon? What is it saying? And I have much more respect and reverence for, if we're going to more of a scientific proofing of people that actually go into the text and look at that, the Hebraisms and the chiasmus or whatever else they're looking at, than I do with, how did Joseph Smith do this? And again, I'm not saying it's not important, but it's a lot less important than what the book claims to be. Either of those books claim to be. And if you can learn to articulate things from what the text actually says, instead of being bothered down here with, well, how did this come about? And here's this scroll and that scroll. What happened with the fire in Chicago? And, who cares? Learn the text first and understand what it's saying. That's what the Book of Abraham is. The Book of Abraham is not how it came to be. The Book of Abraham is the Book of Abraham.
Right.
And learn to articulate what these things might mean. Learn the text. And then go from there.
Right. No, definitely.
So anyway, Kwaku, I really appreciate your time. This is a great discussion.
Yeah.
I hope we can do it again sometime. We'll talk about a couple of different topics, but I wish you the very best of luck on your channel and what you're doing with Fair Mormon and anybody else. Keep doing it. It's important. And I think that a lot of everybody, but especially young adults, need to pay a little bit more attention to what you're doing and try and understand, there is a community there and a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge or even not as much knowledge that have the same beliefs you do. And they're grounded in very good principles and even some matter of facts, as you say, that you're not alone. You don't sit on an island. There's a lot of people out there, and hopefully we can see a lot more of that out YouTube or podcasts or wherever it might be, and people can feel a little bit more comfortable about being who they are and about what they believe in. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate it. And yeah, let's do this again sometime.